The rain drummed steadily against the windows of Jameson's Coffee Corner, a warm beacon of light on Cedar Street. Marcus Jameson wiped down the counter with practiced hands, his dark fingers tracing circular patterns on the polished wood. At 42, he had poured his life savings into this place 3 years ago, transforming the abandoned storefront into the neighborhood's favorite gathering spot. "Another perfect cup, Marcus," said Mrs. Taylor, a retired teacher who came every morning. "This place is heaven." Marcus smiled, the crow's feet around his eyes deepening. "Thank you, Eleanor. You know your approval means everything." The bell above the door jingled, but instead of the usual friendly faces, 2 police officers stepped inside. Officer Reynolds and Officer Brock. "Third time this week." "Good morning, officers," Marcus said, his smile becoming fixed. "Coffee?" "We received another complaint about noise," Officer Reynolds said, not bothering to remove his sunglasses despite the dim lighting. "And possible health code violations." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "That's impossible. I close at 8, and the health inspector gave us a perfect score last month." "We'll need to look around," Officer Brock said, already moving toward the kitchen. Customers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Marcus noticed Mrs. Taylor pulling out her phone, discreetly recording the interaction. Something wasn't right. This wasn't random. This was targeted. Over the next 2 weeks, the police visits became a disturbing pattern. Marcus started keeping a notebook beside the register, documenting each inspection with meticulous detail. Tuesday, claimed reports of drug dealing. Thursday, accused of serving alcohol without a license. Monday, alleged noise complaints from neighbors who, when Marcus spoke with them directly, denied making any such calls. Business began to suffer. The morning rush thinned noticeably. Even loyal customers like Mrs. Taylor started getting their coffee to go rather than lingering. "I'm sorry, Marcus," she whispered one morning, glancing nervously at the door. "It makes me uncomfortable when they come in with their hands on their weapons, watching everyone like we're criminals." Marcus nodded, understanding but heartbroken. His dream was crumbling before his eyes. The final straw came on a rainy Wednesday when Officer Reynolds and 3 additional officers stormed in during the lunch rush. "Everyone out!" Reynolds shouted. "We have a warrant to search these premises for narcotics." Customers scrambled to leave, some abandoning their meals half-eaten. Marcus stood frozen behind the counter, watching helplessly as the officers upended furniture, dumped out coffee beans, and tore through storage containers. "You won't find anything because there's nothing to find," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Officer Reynolds smirked. "We'll see about that." 2 hours later, they left without finding contraband, but the damage was done. The coffee shop was in shambles, food spoiled, and equipment damaged. Marcus locked the door behind them, flipped the sign to "closed," and for the first time since opening day, he wept. Across the street, Zoe Chen lowered her camera. As the owner of the neighborhood photography studio, she had captured the entire police raid on video. This wasn't coincidence anymore. This was harassment. "Did you see that?" Zoe asked, turning to Pastor Mike Williams, who stood beside her, shaking his head in disbelief. "4th time in 2 weeks, Pastor Mike replied grimly. "Same officers, same tactics, but only at Jameson's. None of the other businesses on this block have had a single visit." Word spread quickly through Cedar Street's tight-knit community. That evening, 23 residents gathered in the back room of Zoe's studio. Mrs. Taylor played back her collection of videos showing every police interaction at the coffee shop. "They never do this at Tony's Diner or the bookstore," said Dr. Rivera, who had practiced medicine in the neighborhood for 30 years. "Just at the only black-owned business on the street." "Reynolds has a history," added Terrence Jackson, a retired postal worker. "My nephew works at City Hall. Said there have been complaints against him before, but they always disappear." Pastor Mike stood up. "Marcus built that place from nothing. Created jobs. Sponsors Little League teams. Hosts community meetings. We can't just watch while they destroy him. But what can we do against the police? Someone asked. Zoe held up her camera. We can expose them. With evidence. The room fell silent as a plan began to form. Marcus couldn't believe his eyes when he arrived at his shop the next morning. A dozen neighbors waited outside, offering help to clean up the mess left by the officers. We know what's happening, Zoe explained, showing Marcus the footage she'd collected. And we're not letting it continue. Over coffee served from Marcus's home kitchen equipment, they formed the Cedar Street Watch. Their mission: document every police interaction with businesses on their street and gather evidence of discriminatory treatment. We need to be smart about this, Marcus cautioned. These officers carry badges and guns. They have power. But we have numbers and truth, Pastor Mike replied firmly. The group created a secure messaging app channel. Zoe taught everyone basic principles of legal documentation, timestamps, multiple angles, capturing badge numbers. Dr. Rivera contacted a friend at the ACLU for guidance on citizen rights during police encounters. For the next week, neighborhood volunteers worked in shifts, positioning themselves strategically around the coffee shop and other businesses. Security cameras were installed in discrete locations. Business owners kept detailed logs of every official visit. The pattern became undeniable. While other establishments operated undisturbed, Jameson's received daily visits from Officer Reynolds or his partners, always with different pretexts, never resulting in actual violations. Then came the breakthrough. Terrence's nephew at City Hall discovered that Reynolds' partner, Officer Brock, was cousins with Derek Harmon, owner of Sunrise Coffee, a struggling chain trying to open a location on Cedar Street, directly competing with Jameson's. It's not just racism, Marcus realized, staring at the connection map they'd created. It's corruption too. Armed with weeks of surveillance footage and the damning connection between Officer Reynolds, Brock, and Sunrise Coffee, Marcus and the Cedar Street Watch made their move. They scheduled a meeting with Police Captain Diane Martinez, known for her tough stance on departmental corruption. Marcus sat nervously in the precinct meeting room, surrounded by 5 neighbors including Zoe, Pastor Mike, and Dr. Rivera. The door opened and Captain Martinez entered, her expression neutral as she assessed the group. "You have 15 minutes, she said, taking a seat across from them. "That's all we need," Marcus replied, nodding to Zoe who opened her laptop. What followed was a methodical presentation of evidence, side-by-side video comparisons showing police harassment at Jameson's versus zero presence at other establishments, timestamps proving the increased frequency after Sunrise Coffee's permit application, financial records showing Derek Harmon's campaign contributions to the police union, and finally, text messages between Officer Reynolds and Harmon discussing how to clear out the competition. Captain Martinez's face darkened as the evidence mounted. "Where did you get those text messages?" she demanded. "Anonymous source in the department," Pastor Mike answered carefully. "Someone who's tired of watching good officers' reputations being tarnished by corrupt ones." The captain stood abruptly. "Wait here." 20 minutes passed in tense silence before the door burst open again. Officer Reynolds stormed in, followed by Captain Martinez and 2 internal affairs officers. "This is harassment," Reynolds shouted, pointing at Marcus. "These people are making false accusations." "False?" Marcus stood slowly, meeting Reynolds' glare. "Then explain why you told Derek Harmon in a text, and I quote, 'Don't worry, I'll make sure that coffee shop closes before your grand opening.'" Reynolds' face drained of color. The internal affairs officers moved closer to him. "Or explain," Zoe added, tapping her keyboard to bring up another document, "why the anonymous complaints against Jameson's all trace back to burner phones purchased with your credit card." Captain Martinez stepped forward. "Officer Reynolds, surrender your badge and weapon. You're suspended pending investigation." The room fell silent as Reynolds realized he was trapped by his own actions. 3 months after the confrontation at the police station, Cedar Street buzzed with activity as crowds gathered for the grand reopening of Jameson's Coffee Corner. Colorful banners stretched across the storefront, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air. Marcus stood behind the newly renovated counter, overwhelmed by emotion as he watched the community that had saved his business. The investigation had revealed even more corruption than they'd initially uncovered. Officer Reynolds and Brock had been running a protection racket throughout the district, targeting minority-owned businesses for years. Both officers now faced criminal charges, along with Derek Harmon for conspiracy. Speech! Speech! The crowd began to chant, led by Mrs. Taylor, who now proudly served as the head of the Cedar Street Business Association. Marcus reluctantly stepped out from behind the counter. "I'm not one for speeches," he began, his voice catching. "But I want to thank each of you. When they came after my shop, they didn't realize they weren't just fighting me. They were fighting all of us." Applause erupted as Captain Martinez entered, now accompanied by Officer Tanisha Washington, the newly appointed Community Liaison Officer. "Mr. Jameson," Captain Martinez said, extending her hand. "On behalf of the department, I want to formally apologize for the harassment you endured. The officers involved betrayed their badges and the community they swore to protect." She turned to address the crowd. "We're implementing new accountability measures, including body cameras and community oversight, to ensure this never happens again." Pastor Mike stepped forward. "Change doesn't come from silence. It comes when good people refuse to look away from injustice. Cedar Street didn't just save a coffee shop. We created a model for how communities can stand together." Zoe raised her camera, capturing the moment as Marcus cut the ribbon across his doorway. The flash illuminated faces of all colors, united in celebration. Later that evening, as the last customers lingered over their coffee, Marcus sat with the core group who had stood by him through the darkest days. "What you all did," he said quietly, "wasn't just about saving my business. You showed that when a community unites against injustice, even the most powerful systems can be held accountable." Dr. Rivera smiled. "And we've just begun." The Cedar Street Watch is now advising 3 other neighborhoods facing similar issues. Outside the window, the sun set on Cedar Street, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Inside Jameson's, the lights glowed warm and inviting, a beacon of hope that would never be extinguished again. "To justice," Marcus said, raising his coffee cup. "And community," they responded in unison, their cups meeting in the center of the table.